feel relief, or I feel like I can be, even if I'm surrounded by people that are really dark, or people that got a lot of issues, or people struggling with addiction. At least down here, we're a little more real with ourselves in some ways, right? I'm looking for something that allows me to be all of me. I'm looking for people that aren't going to judge me. I'm looking for... So in Hollis's case, he was very spiritual and involved in spiritual community, but he was also... He went to a place where there was no expectations also, no judgments. No, you could just be all the parts of yourself, even if they were dark, even if they didn't have it all figured together. They weren't all figured out. And that was a lot of friendships around drugs and addiction. So we have to create culture where we are willing to get past status, the kind of whatever it is. Maybe it's the country club world. Maybe it's the world of our religion of origin, this church that we've been told we're supposed to. Maybe it's all this, I should be this, I should be this, I should be this. That will kill a spirit.
Yep. You were talking about soul suppression, you didn't necessarily word it that way, but I think that's just a very interesting way to look at it, because when we suppress parts of ourselves, those parts have to come out, right? But you also had mentioned, Kendall, that Hollis had two people who he could really open up to, despite having thousands of followers and people who knew him. And it makes me think even about with social media now, people may have thousands or hundreds of followers, but don't really have people that they can connect with or talk to that in that deep, authentic way. But let me ask you this. Who do you talk to, as somebody who is a healer, as somebody who is a minister? Who do you talk to?
Okay, yeah. Well, let me say this just in case all Hollis' friends are listening. It's not that he had two people, but he did have just a few people, yeah.
Right.
So who do I talk to? Well, my business partner at Lighthouse is like a soulmate to me. And so, it's kind of that relationship of like... someone told us one time, you guys had a past life where you were an Indian guru and she was your partner in crime, And sometimes I think that's a funny thing to think about, because it's kind of is that. It's like, we shall have her for that. And she stands in a place of peace and really holding the space for how I need to grieve. A lot of times people want to support you in the way they want to support you, instead of finding out how do you need to do this, right? And so she's really good at that. And then, my husband, amazing support. So I have a husband that not a lot of people intimately know, because he doesn't put himself out the same way that I do. But he's like holding down that fort. He says, I hitch my wagon to your star. So, and I have somebody in my life who holds space for me at all times. And my family, and for me, being in a constant dialogue with the divine, that's part of it. But, people show up. It's interesting when you're grieving, people show up that you didn't know had something for you, or you didn't have a whole lot with them before then, and they maybe have been through the grieving process, and so they are right there knowing exactly what to do. And there's some random characters that can come up there. It's like they're planted, So the universe, I think, provides,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's always amazing, like, to see who shows up for you in those moments. And it may be people that you completely expected, and some people you had no idea that they would be there. So it's really a beautiful thing. Tell me a little bit about your just being present in the now, because that's as part of the plan, the action plan of, just practicing being in the moment, because it could be really easy while you're grieving to be pulled in either direction. So getting lost in the memories, of that person being around and you missing them. It could be, thinking about, oh, I wish that, they were here for this event in the future. But how do you continue to practice just being in the now? And you're going to have to bear with me because my dog is barking, but keep talking.
So how do you stay in the now? I think you stay in the now by being willing to actually be in the grief. So just be in the grief, and being in the grief doesn't have it. You don't have any control. You don't have any control.
Mm-hmm.
It's just being a witness to what all is going on. I think, Damon, I think it might be helpful to read what can happen before the funeral and what can happen after the funeral.
Yeah, I can put that, try to see if I can put a link to it in the show notes, because I think that was so beautifully written, so perfectly said and put for so many people that they could really benefit from that. So yeah, maybe there's a way that we can link that in the show notes.
Yeah, I think, because to answer your question, it's just, how do you stay in the now? You stay in the now by being alive with what's present. Yeah. And those lists articulate some of the things that can be present. And what's present is just going to be what's present.
Mm-hmm. And that's because you talked about the contradictions. There are so many contradictions. One moment you're feeling this, another moment you're feeling this. And all of that is okay, and the less you fight over it, and the more that you just surrender into the process, that will help you in your process.
Yes, absolutely. Because you go crazy when you're trying not to.
Right.
Not to hear your heart, not to suffer. People would be so stoic. I can't be mad at the person. I can't go there right now. I just have to keep. They want to push through it like bulldoze through it. That's going to catch up with you in a way that would be far worse if you just walk the journey.
Then if you just right, exactly. It'll manifest itself somehow, some way. That's how emotions do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Energy does not die, right?
Right. Exactly. So let's do this as our time kind of winds down, Kendall. I feel like we've covered a lot of the action plan. I'm just curious, if you were to have any other words of advice or wisdom or even resources that have been very helpful for you. You've mentioned a couple throughout that I'll definitely put those links in the notes as well. But is there anything else, any words that you would like to share with people that could help them as they go through their grief?
Well, one thing I'll say is that, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross was a pioneer, with grieving, and but she was really a pioneer with helping the dying. And she had outlined these 5 stages of grief. Wasn't that what it was? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance.
Yeah.
But we think that's what she was talking about, was 5 stages of grief. She was talking about 5 stages of dying.
Dying, exactly.
Yeah. And grief is a different ballgame. So it's not going to happen in a linear way. It's not going to you're not going to be fine after a year. There's not a time frame on it. So we have to understand that the person who is grieving could be grieving for the rest of their life. They'll be grieving in some capacity for a long time. That what may not look like grieving may be grieving. It's not that cut and dry. We realize now how multidimensional that it is. Grief ebbs and flows, and it does that until it doesn't.
Yep.
So what I want to say is just that pain itself can become connection between people. Pain itself can become connection between you and the divine. So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, Ram Dass has beautiful things to say about grieving. Yep. All of those teachers, Jack Kornfield and the Buddhist teachers in the West, have beautiful things on grief. A friend of mine, Cheryl Barrett, who's part of the fellowship community, wrote a book called Good Grief.
That's right. Yep.
Yep, and that book, she brought it to me, and I needed some things that were in there, so I think you can find that on Amazon. And just, there's places even in Charlotte. Our friend Kim Honeycutt that does ICU talks at Mosaic Church. They're talking about people's working through grief processes there. They have ICU talks events. Ken Wilber's work on grief and on dying, I think is huge. And, I tend to go to the Eastern teachers, Pema Chodron obviously has done a lot on that. And look, if you got to get on YouTube and look up every TEDx talk on grief, everything ever done on grief, I've spent hours and hours and hours in my spiritual journey on YouTube listening to people talk about this subject. Yeah. And when you realize people all over the world are talking about this, it one video, one book, one talk after another is breadcrumbs. It's breadcrumbs that lead to your healing. And so, and you can join me on my page on Facebook. It's we're building a book. We're writing a book, but it's Kendall Heath, Interfaith Minister. I don't know what else it says, but if you look up Kendall Heath, Interfaith Minister, there's a prayer every day there. You can reach out to me, and you want to get people who are doing this work. The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. It's actually what I read from when I was helping Hollis transition home. That is a marvelous work. You can go to Tibetan death meditations. There's a lot of people now that are death doulas in our community who are teaching people about grief and dying. Amanda Brutus Phillips is one of those people here in the Lake Norman, Charlotte area. So, okay, there's a lot. Wow. And the organization you're with, I mean, what you're talking about, Damon, my gosh, it's huge.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's just a conversation that needs to be had, and like you said, there are so many resources out there. Once you start to do the research, gosh, you can kind of get lost in all of it, and so it's a balancing act of diving into it to understand your grief and just allowing your grief to be. This is so helpful. I'm over here like just writing frantically. But this is so great. This is so helpful. And I know that the listeners will find so much value in everything that you have said. I really wish we had a lot more time because I could talk to you forever.
Let's do it again.
I know. We really have to. And I do know that, Hollis is present and, just living out his memory and serving not only the addiction community, but, just as we look at getting out of our shoulds and just getting into being, yes. Is really where that true liberation is. Yes. And it takes work and it's not easy, but it can very much be worth it.
Yes, that is well said. He would be very pleased that we are having, he said, when I go write a book about the reconciling between the light and the dark, and that's the work we're doing. And so he would be very pleased. So, and please, he has a show, episode 45 of Spiritual Charlotte podcast. You can listen to him, tell his story on there. Yes, you said it.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I urge everybody to, to take you up on all your resources and your information. Thank you so much, Kendall, for being a part of this podcast. You are a gift.
Thank you. Yeah.
And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we will catch you guys on the next episode of From Mourning to Action, Powerfully Working Through Loss. Peace, love, and light, y'all. From Mourning to Action, Powerfully Working Through Loss is a podcast based on Dr. Damon Silas's 2 books. The first is From Mourning to Night, Overcoming Loss, and the second one is What's Your Action Plan? 6 powerful ways to get unstuck in your life now. Be sure to check those 2 books out on the website www.damonsilaspsychology.com/store. You can also go on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever you can find any books, and check that book out there. Furthermore, if you like what you hear, feel free to leave a review, and I'm always looking for guests. So please feel free to send an email to damon@tippingpointwellnessllc.com. And as always, thanks for tuning in. Peace, love, and light, y'all.